Are we going to come back to a balanced diet?
I would. I always do.
To what degree is cookie cutter advice really a problem?
I want to be able to call balls and strikes.
What we need, I think, more than anything, is to encourage healthy skepticism because that's the root of science.
Yeah. You make a great point.
But this is my job.
Okay,
This is all I got. I don't really work
I wish I
anymore.
thought of that one, though. I'm not wait a second.
When did you become vocal politically? I know you've always been vocal. But like my experience of Jillian Michaels out there in the ether is a category expert with a lot of passion, a big heart, and a stubborn streak.
For sure.
So when did you?
How did this
I'll
happen?
ask you the
I know.
question I get so much. When did you veer so inexplicably out of your lane, Mrs. Michaels?
Wow, I love that. You get that question, though?
All the time.
Oh, I'm surprised. I've always, never mind. I've always seen you in this capacity. No, I was never political because health was never political. And the things I cared about, like houses burning down and people not being able to get fire insurance and having their lives decimated by natural disasters, weren't political, or rather apolitical. I mean, they were like bipartisan. Everybody cared whether it was political. Like if it's political,
were agnostic.
both sides cared. Yeah,
Fire doesn't care.
Yeah, like this is. Wouldn't somebody on the right and somebody on the left want to save people's homes and livelihoods? Wouldn't you want your constituents to be healthy? So, given that, over the course of, honestly, I think the past 10 years, we've seen everything become a political football, in particular, my space, which is health. And when we started to have these psyops, like you can be healthy at any size, and there's no such thing as biological sex, and it's perfectly fair for a biological male to compete against a biological female. There's no differences. This is when you just go, hold on. There's right and there's wrong. And I have to say something.
Because you feel like those issues are either right down the middle of where you live or adjacent enough to not be ignored.
Absolutely. 100%.
I agree.
And somebody has to say something. So here's another interesting component is when you are medicalizing gender dysphoria in children, right? I'm gay. So I kind of hold a card in your little acronym that still makes no sense to me.
Well, you can certainly have a seat at the table.
Right? So I'm a mom. I also work in the health space. I've spent the last 10 years interviewing MDs and PhDs, so I have some understanding about what would happen if you interrupt puberty or the side effects of cancer drugs, especially when used off-label in perfectly healthy teenagers. And you can't call me a transphobe, although people are, because I have a record of fighting for rights for this community.
This is my point. Now you're out of your lane, right? Now, not because of your opinion, but because your opinion runs counter to another deeply held opinion by somebody who's got, in their minds, a lot more skin in the game.
I would argue I have far more credentials than the majority of those people. And the experts are not actually experts. And in fact, the biggest advocates for this is a group called the W Path. And they're like, we're the world authority on transgender medicine and gender affirming care. And Mike Schellenberger did an incredible expose called the W Path Files, where he, through FOIA requests and whistleblowers, exposed that these guys knew what they were doing to these kids that the kids didn't comprehend and the parents didn't comprehend. They would be sterilized forever. They would never have an orgasm. That there were significant risks to bone development and brain development. They couldn't comprehend the choices. And they lied about it. It's $1 billion business, first of all. And then there is an ideology that people fight for. But now we have pretty good evidence through something called the Cass Review, which was a systemic review.
CASS?
Yes. A pediatrician by the name of Dr. Cass out of the United Kingdom who worked for the Royal Academy of Pediatrics, one of the best pediatricians in Europe, arguably, did an independent, she was tapped by the government to do a meta-analysis, a systemic review of all the different studies on gender affirming care. It took her 4 years to do it. The poor woman has subsequently gone into hiding. I can't even get her for an interview because she was so attacked and destroyed. But nevertheless, due to the results of her research, all of Europe was like, let's pull back on this. But here in the States, the W Path argued that she was wrong. And of course, guess who funds them? I don't want to say it on your show because I don't want it to get choked out, but the drug companies fund them.
Okay. Oh, right. And you were saying earlier, it's like, so people's eyes now start to glaze over a little bit when we start talking about big pharma. And this,
and your algorithm will,
this fascinates me. I don't care.
It'll get choked out.
I think it's important though. I'm walking and I'm listening to you interview Bill O'Reilly of all people.
I know.
How the hell are you interviewing Bill O'Reilly, I think? But I listened to it.
Because I don't understand tariffs and I want to.
Well, it was a great conversation. And the thing that struck me as you were trying to figure out all of the wonky economic stuff, because, right, most people today, regardless of what lane they're in, are frustrated because our world is populated with experts on a given topic that don't agree with each other.
I know.
And what does a rational guy do when the experts can't come to a consensus? Now, maybe it's about climate change. Maybe it's about conception, life. Maybe it's about the ethical treatment of animals. Maybe it's, you just go down the list of things. If the experts can't agree, what are the rest of us to do? So Bill O'Reilly comes on your show to try and explain the nature of these tariffs, which is just so interesting to me. And you expressed, as an avatar for your audience, the kind of frustration most of us would feel when we run headlong into a buzzsaw full of contradictory facts.
Yeah, completely.
But as I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, but that's what's happening in health too.
Absolutely.
Most people who are just trying to live look at the back of a box of cereals and say, what the actual hell does this even mean? I can't pronounce half of the words. Yeah. And how come this one says statins will save my life and this one says they're going to kill me? And how come everybody I have now, all my friends over 60, are getting conflicting advice about what to do? Oh, the HDL, the this. So everywhere I turn, and this is why I thought that conversation on your podcast was important. Not because it was about tariffs, because it was about this overwhelming, ongoing talking past each other because we got no experts to help us anymore, it seems.
The experts are often conflicted, and I don't mean due to some nefarious corruption, but people do root themselves firmly in their ideological positions, and cholesterol being a big one, obviously, and they hold that ground as tightly as possible. They're not attached to outcomes. They're attached to being right.
Dogma. They're certain.
Exactly. So the first thing I want to know is, what is your dogma? What is your incentive to prove a point? Is it to get to an end result? Is it to truly explain what's going on? Is it to find real answers? Or is it to prove, see, we told you Trump was a bad guy and you voted for this. Look what you did. Look at the economy. And I'm like, nah, you have Trump derangement syndrome. I'm not buying it. He's not freaking deluded. I don't buy it. He's been saying this for decades. We've all seen this clip of him on Oprah explaining
1988.
Yeah, explaining the asymmetries in trade and the need to not export our manufacturing and to have national security of being able to produce our own drugs and our own chips and our own technology. Like there's a reason he's doing it. You'd have to be an idiot to think there wasn't. Now the question becomes, what's his end goal? Is he going about it the right way? Well, is there a pain point? Well, he'll reverse course, or what should we be doing? How should we take this information and make the best choices for ourselves? And you got to find somebody that isn't fully entrenched in their dogma, that is and also an expert, though that does matter. So
it's why I asked you before, is it politics or policy?
It's both.
Are we capable of looking at an idea or a concept or a claim separate and apart from the bad orange man, separate and apart from the old man that preceded him, and take our feelings about those people and set them aside and try and approach it with something like a scientific method? I'm just still stuck with the idea that what's the point in getting a second opinion if you know for a fact it's going to gainsay the first opinion? And when you know where the opinions live, what's to stop the average confused person from simply going to get the opinion that they secretly want to hear in the first place?
You're absolutely right about that.
That's your confirmation
You're
bias, right?
absolutely right about that. And I've seen it work for somebody and against them. You know who it worked for? This is interesting and arguably irrelevant to our conversation, but I found it fascinating. Was Tony Robbins had that tumor. I believe it was on his pituitary.
The growth.
Yes.
The giantism.
Exactly. And everybody was like, you're going to die, you're going to die, you're going to die. And he just kept going to doctors until he found one that said, leave it, you'll be fine. And then he was. Now, I don't think that's great advice. I'm not advocating to ignore a tumor in your brain. However, I think it does say something to the effect that you need to defer to your common sense and your gut instincts about something.
Chuck, you know what I love about my American-made 4th of July tea?
What do you love about it, Mike?
It was made in America.
But that tracks.
I say that as a man who's grown frustrated by the fact that many garments that have the American flag on it or say USA are not made in America, and I find that borderline deceptive.
Treasonous, one might say.
Repulsive, at the very least. Yeah, don't be like that. Get your American-made clothing by going to a company that makes their clothing in America. I refer, of course, to American Giant. They've been doing that very thing for 15 years. They buy cotton grown in this country. They dye their own yarn right here. They've got hundreds of cutters and assemblers. They do it all by hand. It's a marvel to behold, and I can't think of a better way to celebrate our country's birthday than by wrapping yourself in the warm embrace of one of these T-shirts or any of the other fine garments they make by hand at American Giant. Chuck, do you concur?
I concur entirely. This is the 4th of July tee. We're both wearing one, and these are great. You can get them at american-giant.com/Mike. Use code Mike. Get 20% off. american-giant.com/Mike.
I couldn't possibly add anything to that, except maybe a song.
American Giant, American made, American Giant, American made. Soon may the noblemen come to bring a bottle for everyone. One day when the waiting is done, we'll take a drink and go.
There's a PhD who I happen to love in nutrition science by the name of Lane Norton. And he just goes out there and tears into everybody. And the reason that I ended up becoming friendly with him is because he tore into me about protein intake. And what I said when we got in our initial fight was, you're not really tearing into me, you're tearing into these other 5 PhDs and the American Medical Association. That's the advice that I'm giving. Now, I love him 90% of the time, but he'll tell you there's no data that says artificial sweeteners are bad. And this is the part where I just think, Lane, we got to default to common sense here. Powders, synthetic powders that are made in these crazy factories. There's no universe where I want to pretend like that's healthy. Common sense dictates to me that it's not.
Well, where's the duty of care? Like, why do I have to prove that something that seems so logically nefarious isn't? Why don't you have to prove that something that seems so unproven is actually good? I mean, you could ask the same question about any new medicine, any new vaccine, and now here we go.
Well, because I'm going to destroy your algorithm. I'm going to kill this show right now, and I swore I wouldn't do it.
Don't worry.
You're going to get 5 views. The issue.
I'll take them.
Who
specifically are these 5? This matters.
That's 4 more than I remember.
A few really dedicated subscribers that will seek out the show the day that it drops, but the algorithm will just push it right off of a cliff. And the truth of the matter is that the 3-letter, I'm going to try to word it in such a way where hopefully the 3-letter agencies that are responsible for regulating this are captured. And the chemicals like artificial sweeteners fall under the GRAS rule, which is the generally recognized as safe rule. And this is a loophole within the FDA that allows food companies to vouch for the safety of the chemicals. And the FDA just goes, yeah, cool. We're in almost every other country of the developed world, 9,000 plus of those chemicals, of the 10,000 that are in our food, are banned. So this is where, you got to say to people, common sense, if it wasn't around 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, 100 years ago, it's probably not great for you. And what's the downside of you not consuming it? So if I'm wrong, and let's just say artificial sweeteners are perfectly safe, is there any downside to you not consuming them if I got it wrong? What's it going to cost you?
Right.
Nothing. But if I'm right and you're consuming them unknowingly and you're drinking 5 different diet sodas a day and you're putting it in your coffee and it's in your sugar-free treats, and it could potentially be bad. And the cumulative effect of all these chemicals, it's very difficult to isolate one of these things. You really can't do it. And when I talk to the different doctors and the different PhDs that come on my podcast, why is early onset cancer diagnoses up 79% over the last 2 decades? You can't answer it because you cannot isolate. Is it the plastics? Is it the 10,000 chemicals in the food? Is it the freaking pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides that are being sprayed on the crops? Is it the fact that the crops are genetically engineered? Is it the vaccines? You could look at all of it together. You can't isolate these things. It's probably all of them.
Yeah, and just the sheer tonnage of it for the average person. This goes back to my earlier point. The average concerned, responsible person wants a workable understanding of tariffs to the point where at a cocktail party, they can form an opinion, articulate it, and then have another hors d'oeuvre and get on with their life. I think the same is true with, should I eat that instead of that? We can't even seem to agree on keto. We can't seem to find a consensus.
I feel I could answer that one for you. Should you want an answer?
Yeah, of course I do.
Okay.
Or just high protein, low carbs.
Honestly, high protein, high fiber is pretty good. As long as you're not overeating your calories, you're not going to get too much protein. And people really aren't. So with that said, the bigger issue is that we're not getting enough protein, especially women. But the thing with keto is it's an elimination diet. In other words, if you can say, well, we've had improvement in autoimmune conditions and we've had improvement in type 2 diabetes and we've seen a lowering of body weight. Well, sure, because we removed all of the garbage that you put in your body. However, we threw the baby out with the bathwater.
What's the baby?
The baby would be organic blueberries, pomegranate seeds, purple potatoes. There's a great doctor by the name of Dr. William Lee who is also a scientist and looks at the ways in which food can cure disease. And this man is credentialed to do so. He's brilliant. He's written numerous books. I've had him on my podcast a bunch of times. And he wrote a book called Eat to Beat Disease. And he looks at, for example, the ways in which pomegranates can help grow a microbe in your gut called Akkermansia. And studies have shown that when your Akkermansia is completely depleted from, let's say, 1 Z-Pack and not replenished, it makes you more susceptible to different types of cancer. So now you're on keto and you're not eating the friggin' purple potatoes that can help fight colon cancer and the pomegranate seeds which can help boost Akkermansia in the gut. So it really is a continuum. It's an elimination diet that is far better than you going to the fast food drive-thru every single day. But there's a robust amount of data for, when you get into carnivore, for fiber. There's more data around the health benefits of fiber than saturated fat. There just is. And we know for a fact that fruits and vegetables, unless you have some sort of food allergy, have tons of nutrients in them that boost your overall health and wellness. So we do know these things. We do.
Are we going to come back to a balanced diet? Is that basically what you're espousing?
No, I would. I always do. There is no Jillian Michaels diet. I don't sell a diet. It really is common sense. Eat whole foods. Don't overeat. Try to remove chemicals as often as possible. Get a friggin' water filter, get an air filter. Focus on getting your sleep and move your body as often as you can, but at the very least have a step goal, do a little bit of strength training. That's 90% of it. The rest is baloney. And even if it isn't baloney, I'm sorry, Mike. I'm watching all of these really, and I don't mean to crap on anybody, and I won't say names, and they could be right. You know,
Look, you already screwed the algorithm. Crap on them. Nobody's listening.
Like, you know, methylene blue. Oh my God, the synthetic dye is God's gift. You know, and I'm just thinking, you know, like my grandparents who, that didn't smoke lived to be quite old, and it wasn't because they had a methylene blue. So in other words, like at the moment, I am 51. I am perfectly healthy.
You look fantastic.
Oh, you're very kind. You're very kind. I do.
I mean, for people who aren't watching, if the evidence demands a verdict, and if what you're screaming has any efficacy at all, then you got to put yourself out there as some measure of proof.
I hope
and I'm buying
so.
it.
Well,
Absolutely.
honestly, one would hope so. I've said that for years. I'm like, when do I get credit now for being 51 and not saying, oh, menopause has decimated me. I couldn't keep the weight off. I couldn't, you know. Mind you, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure I'm experiencing perimenopause on some level, but I have no symptoms of it.
Well, I didn't want to say anything. No, of course not. Look.
You know, I would hope that I would be my own testimonial to a certain extent.
And you are. But the reason it's interesting is that we're living in a state now where, like once upon a time, no one possessed of rational thought would take health advice from a morbidly obese practitioner. But today we do. Because something happened in our brains that convinced us it would be rude to hold that person to the very standard that they're suggesting we embrace. Right. Now, that's crazy town. But we have entered it. We must be this tall to get on the ride, and we are, right? So it's the compliment I mean to pay is that it's refreshing to see somebody walk the walk and bring the receipts. What you're doing is clearly working.
I also there is no dogma. That's why when Lane Norton criticized me about protein, and I was like, all right, come on, let's talk. And he convinced me. I ended up subscribing to his position. With that said, though, it was in direct opposition to the American Medical Association. But see, Mike, this is where, right? You're like, well, geez, which expert do you trust? And you got to look at, okay, who captured the AMA? How much were they paid for the studies that, you know, gave these mandates, if you will? You got to defer to your common sense. And it was also, Lane Norton started to say it, Dr. Rhonda Patrick started to say it, Dr. Peter Attia started to say it. So it was PhDs and MDs.
How much school do I have to go to arm myself with an effective survival guide? And as you formulate an answer, think too about whether or not a cookie cutter advice, like to what degree is cookie cutter advice really a problem? In my world, like my lanes are education and labor. And I mouth off a lot about the dangers of telling a whole generation of kids that the best path for the most people is a 4-year, very expensive path.
Right.
Even though you can look at the data in all sorts of different ways and conclude that path does in fact yield fruit for various other reasons. And then we're going to have an argument that's going to get complicated. But I just see the same thing in your world. 90%, by your own admission, is common sense that can apply universally.
It really does.
But the other 10%, like, what if I've got some pre-existing condition? I mean, diet is medicine. Food is medicine.
You'll find it though. So, for example, if you're getting your physicals regularly, example, you brought up cholesterol, and is this a complicated one? But you can get answers. So I brought Dr. Arthur Agatston on the podcast several years back, and I said, okay, I don't understand. Am I eating saturated fat? Am I not eating saturated fat? Can dietary cholesterol become serum cholesterol? Like, my cholesterol's at 200. Am I going to have a heart attack? Do I need statins? And this is why he created the calcium score. So what he ended up explaining is that certain people have a genetic predisposition to be hyper absorbers. And he said for a small percentage of the population, they are able to, in fact, take dietary cholesterol and absorb it into the arteries. It can happen. And there are people that lack an enzyme to clear low density lipids. They can do a cheek swab to find out if you're one of those people. They can do a calcium score to see if your cholesterol is in fact getting into your arteries. It's quantifiable. And then at that point, when you go, okay, I may have a cholesterol of 220, but I have a calcium score of 0, I don't need to worry about this. But if my calcium score is higher or it's showing plaque in the arteries, then I can have that conversation with my doctor. So another example would be Lane Norton does take statins. And he's like, I've always had high cholesterol. It hasn't affected my testosterone levels. So you can take that individual and you can say, oh, I see you've got a genetic predisposition. You do have, cholesterol in the arteries. Let's put you on a low dose of statins and see how your body is responding to the side effects of that. And if you have that information, you can have that conversation with your cardiologist. So if that cardiologist or your internist says, okay, you've got a cholesterol of over 200 and this is bad. We need to put you on statins. Before they do that, ask for the cheek swab and the calcium score, and then see a cardiologist to have a more detailed conversation. So I get it's annoying, but
I have 6 friends in mind right now. I hope they're listening to this. I hope the algorithm hasn't squashed them.
I do too.
Because
we'll have to send a link.
I will. I mean, it's Jesus. How is the better query? How do we get trust back into your field? How do we get you, since you mentioned the AMA, and since we're going to get squashed anyway.
Subsidiaries of Big Pharma, basically.
It's the army of angry acronyms
Yeah.
in people's minds.
Well
the
said.
CDC, the WHO, the AMA. In my world, it was OSHA. It was, EPA.
Of course. Yes.
People watch Dirty Jobs through the lens of their own expertise, and when they saw things that ran afoul, right? And so we're beset with acronyms and experts within those acronyms, some of whom you say are captured. So
I'll give you some examples.
Okay, I'd like to hear about it. And by the way, I'd like to better understand what role, if any, you've got in MAHA and your relationship with Bobby.
Are you ready for this? I have no relationship with Bobby.
You want one?
I've met him twice. But that just goes to show I have no agenda. I don't work for the administration. I'm not getting paid. He's not a homie of mine. I don't even know his phone number. I've met him twice on a hike, once with my friend Brigham Bueller, who invited me along, who runs a wellness company called Ways to Well. Brigham had invited me on this hike, and then Callie Means had invited me to testify in front of Congress, and Bobby happened to be there. I'm also very careful, not that I think there's anything wrong with MAHA, but I'm not looking to be captured. I don't want to be MAHA, because if something goes wrong, I'll say so.
Just one more acronym.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of the point. And I don't love, God forbid there should be an attempt to monetize the movement. I want to be careful to make sure that I'm not a part of that if that happens.
Yeah.
If something does go wrong, I will call it out completely. When it's like, we fired people who inspect food. And I called Callie and I was like, I need to know what's going on. I'm hearing this in the zeitgeist, and he's like, Jill, listen, these are all the things we're doing right, which I have been following. We're trying to get rid of the grass roll. We're initiating studies to find out the root cause of autism. We are getting all the garbage out of baby formula. We're trying to get soda off of snaps. All this awesome stuff is happening. He's like, but we are moving quick, and mistakes are going to happen. And when they do, we're going to fix them. But you can't expect perfection. Mistakes will happen. And I said, I completely hear you, but you better be careful, because if there's an outbreak of gonorrhea and we fired the people that are tracking that, that doesn't look good. Not a good look. And they know that. These aren't bad people. If mistakes will happen, there's no intention to fire those people. There's no malicious intent. It is a mistake, and mistakes will be corrected. But I want to be able to call balls and strikes. I don't want to monetize any of it. I've been a great advocate for Bobby. I think I've evidenced that, but there is no dogma for me. I don't belong to anybody's club. Mm-hmm. And if something goes sideways, I'll call it out. Period. End of story.
What in the hell does your business card even say these days? What?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know if I'm in business these days.
Well, I mean, back to the tariffs. That hurt, right?
I did.
That hurt your interest.
It did actually. We just signed a deal with a treadmill company because I've been talking about walking pads so much because, you want to give people something accessible. So it's like, what can we do? I'm like, we'll get a walking pad. So this walking pad company reached out and said, does she want to create her own walking pad? Does she want to work with us and endorse our products? We just got this deal done. And we were supposed to do a shoot May 14th, and they manufacture the products in China. So they're like, yeah, that's right. And they're like, we're going to need to pause the deal. We've got to figure out what we're doing, if we're going to move manufacturing to Vietnam. And there's very little I can actually do to make money. I'm perfectly comfortable, don't get me wrong. But I don't work with big food companies. I don't work with big pharma companies.
8 best-selling books?
I do have 8 best-selling books, but there's no money in that either.
Best-selling video or DVD workout?
You used to be able to sell content. Now people are conditioned to get content for free. So podcasts are free. Nobody's paying me any money. If we can cobble together enough through ads then to cover costs, that's great. But
Chuck, get her $20, would you?
yeah, will you give me $20? Buy me a coffee at least, man.
Absolutely. I
Jeez.
offered you one earlier.
You did. You're not
Let
wrong.
the record show. We offered coffee, tea, water, whatever she wants. A nice soda.
Yeah, that'd be great. With no artificial sweeteners, I'll take the straight sugar. It's difficult to monetize it because you can no longer charge for content. It's a loss leader, which is fine. And I'm comfortable from the days I did sell content. So that's great. But if you could sell something that you believe in, like a freaking treadmill or a creatine supplement, cool. That's right in my wheelhouse. And I can make money being honest with you and doing what I like to do. But both of those businesses got smashed by the tariffs because the freaking containers that the supplement company I invested in, they come from China. So a whole shipment got turned around, and I was just like, well, it is what it is.
Well, that's kind of what I was muttering to myself as I was listening to you and O'Reilly talk about this. I had a similar conversation yesterday with Theo Vaughn. Have you been on?
I have not, but I think he seems like a very sweet soul.
He is. I think he's the most unique person in the space right now.
Really?
I really do. He's got such a big heart, this kid. He's from Louisiana. On the one hand, there's something almost, this is probably the wrong word, but there's a weird mix of, he's wholesome. He's redneck. He's a hillbilly. He's a little feral. There's something feral about him.
He talks to the president about doing cocaine.
And he's sitting across from the president. But I saw him do something once. And I
love that interview. But it was my favorite. Yeah, man, you're up in the middle of the night, just staring at shit.
And the president's like, yeah. So was it alcohol for you, or was it the it was so great to see that level, right? So anyway, I'm on Theo's show yesterday, and we're kind of complimenting each other, but we're having this same conversation about trying to understand what the tariff thing means. and you and Bill just reminded me of it again. And my take real quick is that you're either having a tier 2 conversation or tier 1. If it's tier 2, it's only about the economy and your personal economy or the macro economy. Yeah. And I don't know any economist right now who's saying the tariffs are a good idea for the economy. But if you're having a tier 1 conversation, earlier this week, a guy sat where you're sitting and told us the story and offered the receipts of the fact that 60,000 to 100,000 organs are being harvested from prisoners in China. The number of every year. Yeah. It's a $9 billion business, Jill, and the number of prisons now with hospitals built next to them is shocking.
Oh, and God, that's gruesome.
And the Falun Gong, who's been persecuted for decades, 70 to 100 million of them, many of them are political prisoners. People are scheduling open heart transplants. You can't schedule a heart transplant. You have to go on a list, and you have to wait for somebody
to die, get in a car wreck, and be
be brain dead.
Right, of course.
Because you can't take it from a cadaver, right? They're scheduling major organ replacements, and they have been for years. So the thing I wanted you to say to Bill, and the thing I said to Theo that'll probably squash his algorithm, was you're either having a tier 2 or tier 1 conversation. And if you just, like me, come right out of a conversation where you're seeing the receipts of organ harvesting happening in this country, or the Uyghurs, or go down the list of things and go, look, we just have to decide, are we going to be in business with these cats under any circumstance? And that's tough, because now you got your treadmill involved, and I got interest, and that global supply chain touches a lot of different things.
Sure does.
But it's real hard for me to look at that and not think about 1860 in this country, and the conversation about what's going to happen to our economy if we get rid of slavery. What's going to happen? And the arguments were loud and very persuasive. Some even said that the economy could collapse to the point where there'd be a war and tear the country apart. We can't get rid of slavery. But then on tier 1, people were like, you know what? If you're going to wear cotton, you ought to at least visit a plantation. You ought to at least look at how the slaves are treated. In the same way, if you're going to eat a steak, you ought to go to a slaughterhouse.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
And if you're going to...
I've personally been impacted by that one.
I bet.
know exactly what you're talking about.
I have too. And so, look, this is back to policy, not politics. I don't want to make it about Democrat or Republican, but these are hot issues. You could put abortion on the list as well. You could put capital punishment. You're for capital punishment, you ought to see a hanging, and you ought to see the switch flipped. You're for abortion, you ought to see that too.
Yep.
You're for slavery, or you're for wearing goods, right? That's where we are now with China. So it's really unpleasant, and you want to kill your algorithm fast? Say what I just said.
Yes, I get
That'll
it.
walk me right around the barn and shoot it in the head. But I'm telling you, we're talking past each other with health issues, with tariff issues, with all the big issues of our day. When we reduce it to nothing but what's it going to do to the economy, then we might as well talk about work like, well, what's it pay? As if there's nothing else to the job.
What's it doing to my friggin' Roth IRA?
Yeah.
But when I look down the road, you have to ask that question of, if Trump doesn't deal with this, does Rome fall? They're like, oh no, it's never happened. I'd had that conversation with Bill Maher a year ago, and he's like, no, we're like a teenage boy that just gets away with everything. It's like, but forever? So I have to imagine that all the things Trump is concerned about and has been concerned about for decades are very real. And previous administrations have kicked the can because look at the shit show it's created. Who would want to take that on? Bill did make a very good point, though, that like, couldn't we have gone country by country? I can't speak to it. I'm certainly not an economist, but I do think something needs to be done. It's clear that tier 1 here is there's bigger problems.
That's it.
Without question. So I'm for change. I hope this is the right way we're doing it. I don't know.
I'd like to trade with everybody that doesn't offend a tier 1 sensibility, but not because they have something we need, because they have something we want. And then we can make a reasonable deal. My buddies at American Giant, the CEO comes in here and this is a Wall Street guy who started making sweatshirts and hoodies and jeans in America just to prove it could be done. But he's my age, and he remembers in 1988, 80% of all the clothing we wore in this country was made here. Today it's 2%. And the argument is, well, these jobs, these factories, it's really better if somebody else makes them for us. And the next thing you know, you're having the same conversation about oil and timber and medicine.
I just had this conversation about drilling. Like, oh, well, are you happy? I'm like, gas is down. Well, yeah, because we're drilling here. But I was like, but what? It's
Where do you think
planet.
the gas is?
It's same planet. So you're okay drilling in somebody else's backyard, but not here. Now you're dependent on Russia or Iran or whatever in the vague understanding I have of this, because you don't want to pollute our environment, but it's the same planet. I think it's a closed system, ultimately.
From what I've read, the
Am I
planet,
wrong?
the planet rotates, Jillian, see, and above the planet is the atmosphere, and the degree to which it rotates with the underlying landmass, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that the smoke from over there is eventually going to get over.
Right. We don't want to cut down the trees here because of the woolly mammoth mole that lives in the bark of the fallen oak or whatever the heck it is.
Well, now
But you don't care about them in Canada's forest? Like, what am I missing about that? It is so bizarre.
You're not missing anything. It's NIMBY. It's not in my backyard.
Yes.
And that's what Ed Ring would tell you about the spotted owl and the tortoise and the Delta smelt. And there's a long list of misplaced priorities and misplaced urgencies.
Right.
And look, everybody's got a different dog in the hunt, and everybody cares more about this than that. And that's what I think we've got a front row seat to. Throw the internet, throw our devices on top of everything else, and now we can participate in the conversation if it's even that. We can participate in the miasma, the shit show, as you would say. It's happening all around us all of the time.
Constantly.
And nobody knows who to trust and what to believe, which is why it's a good time to have a podcast, right? Because you can, who else is going to talk about this for this length? Forget the mainstream. They can't do it. It's going to be Theo Von. It's going to be you. It's going to be Rogan. Maybe us to some extent. I don't know. But that's,
of course.
Where else are we going to talk it through?
Are you following the criticism that Joe is getting because Douglas Murray said you're platforming people with dangerous ideas? Are you following that at all?
I watched the whole thing.
I did too.
Fascinating.
I loved every minute of it.
It was the best discourse.
I agree.
Warts and all, right? Warts and all, but Dave Smith and Douglas Murray with Joe Rogan assuming the role as some kind of de facto moderator and 12 million people listening.
I took stuff away from both sides, by the way.
Absolutely.
I was like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, wow, I didn't know that. And it did shift me a little bit. And I ended up writing Dave, and I was like, Dave, I got to be honest. I've always leaned more pro-Israel, and I still do. But you made some really good points that have shifted the way that I'm looking at this and at the lens through which I'm viewing the situation. And I appreciate your humbleness, your openness, your intelligence, the fact that you're always out there, doing these things. And because I was geared more towards Douglas Murray's position initially.
I am too.
And maybe still am, arguably,
I still am.
but it's still kind of am.
Well, the thing I disagreed with Douglas on was the primacy of experts. And the reason I liked your conversation with Bill is that you got a chance to be you, the person we know, but out of your comfort zone and trying to learn and trying to understand something. Douglas was arguing that, look, this is the grown-up table, and the stakes are very high, and I don't really know that we need a comedian coming in here to mouth off about the geopolitical realities that are liable to either usher us into a third world war or not, right? And Dave's point is like, well, wait a minute. Have the experts let us down, yes or no?
Yep.
Is there a consensus anywhere among the experts? And Douglas is like saying, well, look, yeah, there actually is. Winston Churchill was a great man, the right guy at the right time. And to have these other people out there suggesting such and such is crazy and irresponsible. And I'm sitting home listening to that thinking, yeah, you know what, I do agree with that because I've read everything there is to read, I think, on Churchill. But what do you say to somebody, what about a flat earther?
Yes.
What about somebody who wants to say, hey, you know what, that virus, it wasn't from a wet market, right?
Yep.
So now you have to pick. Now you have to decide, which your issue is and when you start to feel uncomfortable. What he should have said was, hey, what do you say to somebody who's pretty sure the moon landing was faked? Now, Joe's had a dozen conversations with people who believe this.
Yes.
Should you be allowed to talk about that possibility?
The alternative is censorship.
That's right.
Did you just see that they uncovered some obscene amount of money in grants from the Biden administration to combat disinformation? And of course, it was all tied around COVID, which was completely diabolical and nefarious. So you start to see these videos of politicians, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Senator Kerry, guys like Bill Gates. We got to have AI that filters out this health disinformation. Well, could that be because you have billions invested in the tech and the vaccine? And you realize Bill Gates funded something called the Virality Project, because I had a woman who was vaccine injured on my podcast during the AstraZeneca vaccine trials. he funds this thing called the Virality Project to suss out vaccine hesitancy on the web. This is the brief that lands on Biden's desk that he then utilizes with what was Twitter and is now X and Facebook to have them systematically silence dissenters. Do you want that? Or are you willing to listen to a guy that says Churchill was the bad guy? I would much prefer to do my own homework on an issue, I'm sorry, than have the alternative. And I don't know where the middle ground would be, because which experts can you trust? You only have a choice, in my opinion, to consume all of the information and do your own homework. I'd rather have all the information.
And that is chaos. When people, if you're asking 330 million people in this country to do their own homework and arrive at their own conclusion, and we know that the experts that exist, we know they're out there to confirm virtually any belief. So all the reasoning can become reductive, and all of the opinions now can be bolstered by the fact that I found an expert, like you were saying with Tony. You're like, look, I found a guy who said leave it alone, so I'm going to leave it alone. Right. So we're not going to unwrap it. I think it's the most interesting and best time to be alive in the history of the world, if for no other reason, because wow, man, if you're bored right now, then you're never going to be engaged with freaking anything ever. If you can't find something to just luxuriate in, right? So I see that as good, but the challenge is to come to terms with the fact that this thing, my little device here with an internet connection, I could go live right now on Facebook with 7 million people watching and say any fool-headed thing I want.
Right.
This is a gun. This is a weapon.
But Mike, where's the agency and the accountability? To a certain extent.
I like when you whisper, by the way. That makes it intense.
I'm not crazy about it.
Yeah,
but
poor
okay.
Chuck. He's like, uh-oh.
Mike, where's the agency?
She's leaning in.
People need to take accountability. Just blew his
Wasn't ready
eardrum
for
out.
that. Yeah.
Careful what you wish for, buddy. At the end of the day, we do have to take some responsibility. And we love to put people in this victim state. Oh, you can't lose weight because you have a disease called obesity. Oh, no, you can never elevate yourself out of poverty because the world is against people of color. Oh, no. It's this constant, like, you're too stupid to do your own homework. You're not sophisticated enough to figure it out.
You're a climate denier.
Honest to God.
You're a protein denier. You're a saturated fat denier. That's what you are. Look, on the one hand, what we need, I think, more than anything, is to encourage healthy skepticism, because that's the root of science. Yeah. To be willing to be wrong. That requires humility.
You make a great point.
But this is my job. This is all I got. I don't really work anymore.
I wish I thought of that one, though. I'm not wait a second.
I don't do shows anymore.
Please continue. Sorry.
There's some smart person should come up with the graph that juxtaposes the relationship between certainty and skepticism, or humility, you could say. And it seems like the more fraught things become and the more uncertain things become, the more humble we should be, because surely, no matter what your belief is, a whole lot of people are wrong about everything.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think that lines up politically. I think my conservative friends are wrong about a certain number of things, and I think my liberal friends have managed to get their heads so far up their butts.
Oh my God.
But I don't think we can paint with too broad a brush. And to your point, that requires extraordinary homework. That requires, like, you've got to look at every issue, and you got to think, what's his name? Ben Shapiro in the first term with Trump. He used to be like, look, there's nothing left for me to do except say good Trump, bad Trump, and look at every single decision through the eyes of that decision and nothing else. And so he did. And I admired that. I tried to do the same thing. I tried the same thing with the last president. I tried to do the same thing with everything, but it's really hard. I'm finding it difficult.
I know. I see what you're saying, especially because when Trump does something that people really don't like the Maryland guy that they sent to the El Salvadorian prison, and the Supreme Court said bring him back, and supposedly they've defied the Supreme Court order. And I'm thinking to myself, if all of this is true, I'm against it. And then all my friends on the left are like, you see, what a monster. And it's like, so who wants to take that on? So you want to defend it because you don't want to hear that you were wrong and they were right. But I will acquiesce and say, if all this is true, I disagree with it. However, all the things that happened with the Biden administration, letting all of these gang members in the first place, letting the cartels utilize our border as a $1 billion business, trafficking kids, trafficking fentanyl. If 1% of 14 million people are criminals, not good with that either. Like, if I've got to pick an evil, I'm still good with my choice as it stands right now.
And if you're not, just check out the news 24 hours from now. Because I got news for you.
Yes.
That Maryland thing is looking a little wobbly.
I saw that today in the Free Press.
Really wobbly. So, look, back to the tariffs.
Right.
The thing that amuses the wrong word, because I got businesses too, and I got a 401k, and I'm in the market, and this is not pleasant to watch, But the thing, when it moves this fast, the experts are now confronted with a new challenge, which is your opinion, whatever it is now based on data that's irrelevant and obsolete because you're still alive and an hour went by or a day. So it's like
An hour went by. So true.
I've never seen so many otherwise reasonably intelligent people look so foolish because, my buddies over at the National Review write these thoughtful, reasoned pieces. I don't always agree, but they come out because it takes time to write 2,000 thoughtful words. It takes time to edit it. It takes time to get it out there.
Right.
And by the time they get it out there, there's a new headline. And every single thing they wrote about, never mind if it was right or wrong, it's just over.
Yep.
So it's like trying to read a book with no spaces between the words. That's where we are now. It's like trying to read the back of a script or a list of ingredients. It's just Greek and a lot of stuff jammed together. And I agree with you. We have to do our homework, but nobody trained us to do this level of analysis and thought on every freaking topic.
I don't disagree with you. I like your solution of what is the percentage of skepticism you need to apply to every scenario. What is the gut check on the issue? Is your expert captured? We saw that with Birx and Fauci and Collins. Very clearly they were captured. And you could tell. That's the part where it's just, if you didn't see that these guys were captured, if your common sense didn't dictate that it didn't make sense, I am somewhat surprised. Even just the concept of the mask, you can get it in your eyeballs. What? It doesn't, where like
we can't broadly encourage skepticism if the immediate reaction to someone who's skeptical is to brand them a denier.
Yes.
So you're a vaccine denier, you're a wet market denier, you're a mask denier. I still stand in jetways a couple of times a week, and I still see the signs 6 feet apart. And I'm like, to the airlines, you realize none of that is rooted in anything scientific, and the people who asked you to implement that rule have since walked it back.
Yep.
Why are these stickers still here? Why in the world won't you take the stickers away to say maintain social distance? I see it in airports, in jetways today.
What's the answer?
I honestly don't know. It could be Occam's razor, the simplest. It could be, the maintenance guys.
It's still on my mom's building.
We have cuts.
When I walk in,
Yeah.
It's like masks. I think to this day.
Mask up.
But no one just bothered to take it down?
I think maybe the act, like, if the person who put it up believed they were doing a virtuous thing, then the only way they can take it down is to admit they were wrong or lied to by someone they trusted.
Right.
And that's painful. It's always painful to realize you've been betrayed.
I really don't struggle with that, but I appreciate like that moment where it's like, oh God, you get attacked by your friends who hate Trump. But I had a vaccine scientist that was literally sold to my podcast producer years ago. That's like, this is one of the people that's working on the vaccine tech, and they just want to educate your audience. And I was like, awesome. Thanks. Let's do it. And looking back now, oh my God. It's like, oh, it just stays in the shoulder. It's out of the body in 24 hours. We've had this tech for 30 years. Don't be a fool. And all of it was a lie.
I know.
But I didn't know at the time. I thought I was a good guy. I thought I was doing the right thing. And that's the part where I'll say, like, I'm sorry, I gave you bad information. I did not know. I thought this is an expert. Surely. And I think if you can walk it back, at least you're role modeling that for other people, and more people can do it, because you're only as good as the information you have at the time.
Look, humility, allows you, when you put bad policy into place and you say, listen, we're doing the best we can. Nobody has a crystal ball, but this is what we think right now. That's different than saying, trust us. We know what we're doing. Now, since we got to land the plane here in a minute, but we'll bring it back to your hero. What did Newsom do? He not only implemented the policies,
he was the most draconian
with certainty. Mm-hmm. He violated his own policies, and for me, you'll have your list of reasons. Everybody will have their hot button. I'll never get over the French Laundry.
Oh, I will not either.
I will never.
Absolutely not.
I will never get over. I'll forgive it because, hey, I'd like to be charitable. But that level of hypocrisy in a governor should be disqualifying, period.
I completely agree with you. And he was the last one to reopen the schools. He was the most draconian with his lockdowns.
He arrested a guy right out there for surfing.
Yes, I remember that.
And basically in the same week he was having dinner at the most expensive restaurant in the state without a mask. So I can't pretend that didn't happen. Like, to the earlier point, that's a thing I have to look at if I'm going to consider voting for him. I have to look at that. I don't need to measure it against the other option. I just have to look at that and say, that level of hypocrisy is either tolerable or it's not. That's a personal decision. Final question. It's not even a question, but I want you to talk just a little bit about your philanthropy. Because I'm endlessly interested in why famous people do nice things. And this is your opportunity, by the way, to make yourself likable to those you've offended in the last hour.
I mean, right. To be totally honest with you, I get involved in different things, but I'm very much against internet philanthropy, like the posts. I hate that stuff. One thing that really impacted me many years ago, I had a previous a client who I had been a personal trainer to, and she was a producer for Maria Shriver at CBS News, and then produced a documentary on refugees, in particular the crisis that was going on in Syria at the time. And you're seeing these disgusting, horrific visuals of little bodies of children and babies washing up on beaches. And my dad is Syrian and Lebanese, so I thought, like, am I related to one of these kids? Like, that could be like my third cousin, this little child on the beach. And the things that you don't work for, that's I mean, if we were to use, I hate this word so much, but if we were to be honest about things that are, quote, a privilege, I didn't earn being a citizen here. I got lucky. And then you've got the to whom much is given, much is required. And I wanted to find a way to be helpful for the people that were not advantaged in the way that I was. So we started working with United Nations Refugee Agency, and I went and stayed at a refugee camp in South Sudan. I wanted to go to Syria. I want to be clear. Not like I didn't end up in South Sudan because I'm a white savior. I ended up there because much bigger celebrities were raising awareness in Syria. So they asked me to go to South Sudan because nobody was. I stayed in a refugee camp there, and of course donated and tried to raise awareness, and started an online campaign where it's like, okay, get people to sponsor you. Refugees take this many steps over the course of a year. And that's a cause that's really important to me. And I do believe in legal immigration. It's one of the reasons I adopted internationally, because I was like, I have this golden ticket.
2 kids, right?
Two, but my ex had my son. He's a great kid, and he's adopted to me, but he was a citizen, obviously, regardless. But I had the ability to give somebody citizenship. I did it legally. It took me 2 years. It cost me a heck of a lot of money, and I had the means to do it, which is why I didn't adopt in America, why I adopted internationally. So for me, that's a really big deal. And I do think that I know for a fact we had a very good system in place to vet refugees. There had never been a terrorist attack by a refugee that had been relocated in the States. This is very different than being an economic migrant, and it's a separate podcast entirely. But it's something that for some reason has moved me pretty deeply. And the animal stuff's big for me.
Yeah.
It's the innocence, man. It's just the ones that cannot, under any circumstance, pick themselves up by the bootstraps because they literally have no boots. There's no means.
No thumbs.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the thing about bootstraps. If you don't have a thumb, man.
Screwed.
You, website, anything you want to, like, where do people go to get more of your particular brand of authenticity and charm?
JillianMichaels.com, and the podcast that you mentioned is everywhere you get a freaking podcast.
Keeping it real.
Keeping it real.
Maybe I could get you on as a guest.
Anybody listening? Because my standards are pretty, well, never mind. You've been here.
Depends. Don't say big
You know exactly
we'll
what.
get tons of views.
I'd be happy to. Where do you podcast from?
Van Nuys. We have a studio in Van Nuys.
I thought you were out of the state.
I am, but I joined Bill Maher's network, and that freaking studio is in Van Nuys.
I got you.
So I come in and out.
Where's the new home gonna be? Or
Jackson, Wyoming.
Oh, yeah,
So
you said
it's-
that. That's awfully nice.
It doesn't suck.
The Tetons. You know what I love about the Tetons? Unlike any other range, these things they come like right out of the ground, like this.
It's dramatic.
It's so.
It is.
It's great. I'm glad you have a good view, and at the risk of sounding sexist, you've certainly provided me with one
Oh,
for
you're
the
so
last
kind.
90 minutes.
Thank you.
That
I will
was
take
nice of
it.
me. You're welcome.
I will take it. Thank you so much.
Come
This
back
was so
anytime,
much
and
fun.
I'd be happy to darken your
Can I
doorstep.
coordinate with you?
Sorry, what's
Can I
that?
coordinate with you?
100%.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
Chuck. Yeah. Well, or who's ever in his position. This week.
Yeah. He threatens to
We're
fire
looking
me
at some
quite a
tough
bit.
facts.
Yeah.
We're getting rid of him next week.
Thanks, everybody. It's Jillian Michaels. I'll talk to you next week.
If you like what you heard, and even if you don't, won't you please, pretty please, subscribe? Well, I hate to beg and I hate to plead, but please, pretty freaking please, please subscribe.